The night I married the love of my life, my own son grabbed the mic, called my husband a nobody, and tried to clown him in front of 400 people. I smiled, let him finish, then calmly walked over and handed him an envelope that took his truck, his money, and his fake little power trip away. You think you know what a disrespectful son story looks like? Watch this to the end. And then tell me whose side you're really on. This is Evelyn. I'm 61 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before I continue, please subscribe to this channel and hit the button. Also, let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The air inside the reception hall smelled like fresh roses and candle wax. Soft jazz floated above the gentle clinking of glassware, the kind of music you don't notice until it stops. Hundreds of people, all dressed like magazine covers, sitting at round tables, champagne already sweating in their flutes. It was the biggest wedding I had ever attended. And it was mine. I wore silver, not white, not ivory. Silver satin tailored so precisely it felt like armor. My hair was pinned up the way I always dreamed of when I was younger, watching old Hollywood movies. And beside me stood Jacob, my second husband. His shoulder brushed mine now and then, steady as a promise. He looked exactly how a man should look on a day like that. Comfortable in his own skin, not performing for anyone. Not flashy, not trying. Just calm. Solid. The kind of presence you feel before he even speaks. He squeezed my hand once when they gave us the mic. I nodded for him to pass it to my son first. Matthew took it, smiling like he was accepting an award. He raised his glass, cleared his throat, and said, "I guess I should say something about the groom, even if he's kind of a nobody." It wasn't the words that cut. I've heard uglier things in smaller rooms. It was how proud he sounded when he said them. Like he thought he was being clever. Like humiliating Jacob in front of 400 people was some sort of joke they'd all clap for. Like cruelty wrapped in a smile had somehow become acceptable. A few people chuckled. The kind of awkward laugh you make when you don't know if you're supposed to. Their eyes slid sideways toward me, checking, measuring. Others just sat there, eyes wide, heads tilted slightly, watching to see what I would do. Jacob didn't flinch, not even a twitch at the corner of his mouth. He didn't even blink. His gaze stayed soft, focused on Matthew, as if he were listening to a headline he'd already read. He just stood there, hands folded, like he had expected this. Like he'd decided in advance that my son's opinion would not rewrite the truth of who he was. And I realized, maybe he had. Maybe he knew my children better than I wanted to admit. Matthew kept talking, thanking the caterers, joking about the open bar, barely mentioning me. I watched him, tall and smug in his suit, holding a glass I paid for, speaking into a mic I rented, in a venue Jacob covered entirely. He finished with, "But hey, if my mom's happy, I guess that's what matters, right?" The line sounded light, but it landed heavy. Then he smiled again. The crowd gave a weak applause. It rose, stumbled, and died quicker than he expected. I didn't move. My back stayed straight, my chin level, my hands loose at my sides. Not yet. There is a thin moment between humiliation and decision, and I stood right on it. When the clapping died down, I took the mic. The weight of it settled into my palm like something I'd carried in other forms my whole life. My fingers were steady, my voice even. My heart pounded, but the words lined up anyway. "Before we continue," I said quietly, "there's something everyone here should understand." I felt the room shift. It's subtle but real, that tilt when people sense the script changing. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Chairs creaked slightly as people leaned in. Even the waiters slowed their steps. "I've known Jacob for 10 years, I said. "We met after a season of my life that I don't talk about often. Some of you were there. Some of you left." I turned my eyes toward a few family members who suddenly found the tablecloth interesting. Their shoulders tightened, their fingers flattened against the linen, as if they could press themselves out of the story. When I lost the house, when the divorce drained my savings, when my health failed for 2 winters straight, Jacob showed up, quietly, without asking for anything. I looked at Matthew. He wasn't smiling now. His jaw set, his eyes narrowed just a little, the way they used to when I told him no as a boy. He paid for my medication when my Medicare appeal was denied. He fixed the roof after that tornado in 2017. He helped Emily get through nursing school. And when Matthew needed a down payment for his business, I let his name hang in the air until the silence felt personal. I paused. He gave it. No contract, no conditions, just trust. Now it was silent. The kind of silence that hums in your ears. No background music, no whispers, just the hum of chandeliers and the quiet pulse of what I had just said. Truth settling into spaces where assumptions used to sit. Matthew's jaw clenched. A small muscle near his ear jumped. The old teenage tell that he was cornered. His wife glanced at him, then down at her hands. Her fingers drew slow circles on her napkin, eyes fixed on the table. I waited a beat, then said the last sentence like it was carved in stone. The man you just called a nobody is the reason most of us are standing where we are today. I didn't raise my voice. The sound system carried every syllable to the back wall. I didn't look at the crowd for applause. I wasn't performing. I was correcting. There was none. No one wanted to be the first to clap over a wound being exposed. Just silence. Thick, heavy, honest. The kind that makes people see themselves a little too clearly. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something click back into place inside me. Not loudly, just a quiet, certain shift. Not anger. Anger had already cost me enough. Not revenge. Revenge still lets them live in your head and call it home. Something stronger. A line drawn gently but firmly across my own life. Control. Control over my voice, my choices, my table from this day forward. Be honest. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have laughed it off and swallowed it whole, the way so many of us were trained to? Comment below. I read every single one. I sit with my tea at night and scroll through your stories, nodding along more often than you'd think. And if this story made you feel anything, if it pressed on a bruise you thought had faded, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I still have chapters left, and I plan on telling them my way. The next one might hit even closer. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. The silence after I spoke was so loud I could hear the soft fizz of the champagne still bubbling in glasses, like the room was pretending everything was still festive while every person inside it held their breath. Jacob reached for my hand again, just a small touch. Grounding. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The weight of his fingers said, "I saw what happened. I'm still here." I handed the mic back to the DJ, nodded once, and stepped down from the small stage. People tried to smile at me as I passed, but their faces were tight, eyes unsure. Some couldn't even look up. Matthew sat back down beside his wife. Her expression said everything: shock, confusion, maybe shame. I didn't stop to read it too long. I was done carrying everyone else's emotions before they had to carry their own. The rest of the night continued technically. The dinner was served. The music returned. But the room never got its rhythm back. The laughter that did come sounded thin, careful. I didn't sit at the head table after that. I chose a smaller table near the side exit, just me and Jacob. We ate in peace. For the first time that night, I could feel my shoulders drop, and I noticed something. One by one, people started stopping by. Not to talk to me, to him. They approached slowly, holding their glasses with both hands. Aunt Louise, who once told me I was moving too fast, came over with watery eyes and said, "I didn't realize he did all that for you." Her voice trembled, the old certainty gone. Jacob smiled, nodded politely, said, "I just wanted her to have what she deserved." Then Emily came, my niece. She hugged Jacob like he'd just saved her life, because in some ways, he had. I remembered her nights at my kitchen table crying over student loans and tuition deadlines, and him quietly sliding his card across the wood. She whispered, "I wouldn't be an RN if it weren't for you. I'm so sorry, Uncle Jacob. I didn't know Matt." He stopped her with a kind smile. "Water under the bridge," he said gently. But I noticed his eyes didn't soften quite the same way. Eventually, even my sister approached, the same sister who once suggested Jacob was too plain for me. She didn't apologize, just sat down for a few minutes and said, "You really know how to make a point, Ev." I just lifted my glass. Sometimes that's as close to forgiveness as you can get with people who don't know how to say they're sorry. But Matthew, he never came. He stayed at his table, his face locked in a polite expression that fooled almost nobody. I saw him keep checking his phone, scrolling, tapping, texting, avoiding. What he didn't know yet, what nobody knew, was that this moment, this public unraveling, it didn't start tonight. It started last year, when I found the bank statements. See, Jacob and I share a trust. Everything we've built, protected together. When we funded Matthew's business startup, $42,000 to be exact, it was supposed to be a loan. I asked for terms. He said he'd draft something. He never did. Then 6 months passed. No updates, no numbers, no photos of a storefront, no email saying, "Here's where we are." I checked the business license. It was inactive. Checked the account where he said the inventory was stored. Empty. He lied. I stayed quiet. I gave him a chance to come clean. He didn't. Every time we spoke, I waited for him to bring it up. He never did. Then I found the receipt. A down payment on a brand new GMC truck. His name on the title. Not the business, not a company asset. Just Matthew in clean printed letters. That night, I waited until Jacob was asleep. I sat in the kitchen in my robe, reading through our legal trust files. Found the clause. Discretionary gift recovery, through court or internal transfer. Jacob had added it. quietly. I remembered teasing him once about how long he spent with the lawyer, calling it overkill paperwork. I called our lawyer the next morning, filed everything under marital asset misuse. We could pull it back, legally, every penny. The attorney talked in careful, measured phrases. Jacob never said a word. He just nodded once and said, "Whatever you want to do, I trust you." No lecture about my son. No, I told you so. I didn't take the money back right away. I wanted Matthew to look me in the eye, to take accountability, to say, "I messed up, I'm sorry, I want to make it right." Instead, he avoided us. No calls, no visits. His number showed up less and less on my phone until weeks passed and my own child felt like a stranger, until the wedding invitation went out. And now, here he was, calling Jacob a nobody, after draining the very funds that paid for the napkins he was using to wipe his mouth, after taking from the same trust that kept the lights on, and the roof fixed when my body was too tired to fight for it. By the end of the night, guests had mostly cleared. The dance floor was empty except for two little cousins spinning in their socks. The staff began clearing plates. Glasses clinked softly as they were gathered and carried away. I walked toward Matthew's table slowly. Each step felt solid, like my feet finally belonged to me. He stood when I reached it, his expression guarded. Matthew. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke." Me. "No, it wasn't." I kept my voice low, but there was no softness in it. His wife stood too, clearly uncomfortable. Her eyes darted between us as if trying to measure the damage in real time. Me. "You lied to me about the business, about the money, and then you humiliated the man who tried to help you anyway." Matthew's voice dropped. "Matthew, Mom, don't make this into a thing. We're family." He said, family like it was supposed to erase everything. I smiled. Me. "That's exactly why it's a thing." I handed him an envelope. Inside, a notarized letter from our attorney. The paper was heavy, official, the kind of document that didn't care about hurt feelings. The trust funds were being pulled back. His truck would be repossessed by next week. The IRS was already notified of the gift misclassification. He opened it, scanned the paper, and froze. His eyes moved fast at first, then slowed. The color drained from his face. Matthew. "You're serious?" Me. "Jacob didn't ask for a thing in return, but I will. I'm done paying for people who spit on what they're given." He tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. "Matthew, you're choosing him over me?" The question came out smaller than he meant it to. Me. "No, I'm choosing respect over entitlement." I let the words land and stay there between us, and I left him standing there, in the middle of a room he thought he owned, with nothing but a ruined smile and a paper he couldn't talk his way out of. For the first time in our lives, he was going to have to live with something he couldn't charm, excuse, or ignore away. The Monday after the wedding, Matthew called, twice. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail, and his voice didn't sound angry. It sounded hollow. "Mom, I just think this got out of hand. We can talk, right?" "I didn't know it meant that much to you." That was the problem. He didn't know, because he never cared to ask. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to that message twice. Light came in through the blinds. Jacob's coffee mug still sat beside the sink. No wedding music, no clinking glasses. Just the hum of the refrigerator and my son's voice. He said he didn't know it meant that much to me. $42,000. 10 years of a man showing up when no one else did. A room full of people who had gotten comfortable with what Jacob gave and forgotten that he didn't have. 2. He didn't know. It meant that much. I pressed delete. 2 days later, a white envelope showed up in our mailbox here in Missouri. Typed return address. Hand delivered. Someone had left it quietly on our porch. Inside, a handwritten letter from his wife. Her handwriting leaned to the right, all soft curves. She apologized for the speech, for the money, for standing beside him in silence when she knew what he did was wrong. I pictured her at the reception in that pale blue dress, fingers wrapped too tight around the stem of her glass, eyes darting from Matthew to Jacob to me. She ended it with, "I hope, in time, you'll let us earn back what we lost." I ran my finger under that last line, what we lost. But it was never about the money. It was about what people show you when they think you owe them everything, and how quickly they shrink when they realize you don't owe them anything at all. It was about the way some people spend other people's sacrifices, the way they treat loyalty like a bottomless account. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Didn't tear it. Didn't throw it away. Just placed it in the drawer with the takeout menus and spare batteries. Not forgiven, not forgotten. Just filed. Jacob never brought it up. Not the speech. Not the silence that followed. Not the fallout. Instead, he brought home tulips that Friday. My favorite. The soft purple kind. He put them in a vase without saying a word. When I walked into the kitchen and saw them on the table, my chest pulled tight for a second. Not from sadness. from recognition. And I looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who had been dismissed, overlooked, called a nobody. And I saw what real presence looked like, not loud, not flashy, just there. The kind of there that shows up at 2 in the morning when the pain medicine wears off. The kind of there that remembers your favorite flower in the exact way you take your tea. He dried his hands and glanced over at me. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I said. And for the first time in a long time, it was true. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stopped pretending it wasn't broken. When my first marriage ended, I thought I'd lost everything. The house, the security, the belief that anyone would show up when I needed them. I remember sitting on the floor of an empty living room, watching movers carry out the last pieces of furniture. Then Jacob came along, not with grand gestures, with small, steady ones. He helped me fix the porch before the first snow, sat in the hospital with me during a gallbladder scare, passed me tiny cups of ice chips when I wasn't allowed anything else. He carried folding chairs to family BBQs, showed up early, stayed late. He learned everybody's coffee order without ever making a speech about it, never asked for credit, never needed to be seen. So when Matthew tried to humiliate him that night, he didn't break because he had nothing to prove. He knew who he was. The insult bounced off a man who had already built a quiet, solid life. But I wasn't going to let that moment pass, because silence lets lies grow. And truth deserves volume. I never wanted to hurt my son. Like any mother, I wanted him close, not cut off. But I also never thought he'd weaponize my happiness to feel powerful. Use my second chance at love as a prop in his performance. Turn the man who kept me standing into a punchline so he could feel taller. There's this myth people believe. That family means immunity. That if someone shares your blood, they can never cross the line. That you're supposed to swallow, excuse, and explain away anything they do because that's just how he is. But here's the truth. Family doesn't excuse betrayal. It makes it worse, because they know where the soft spots are. Weeks passed. The world quieted around us. We went to the grocery store together on Sundays, took evening walks when the Missouri air was cool enough to breathe deep. Sometimes my phone lit up with Matthew's name. Sometimes it didn't. Either way, I stopped staring at it, waiting. Thanksgiving came. Jacob and I hosted, smaller group this time, people who meant their apologies, people who brought more than opinions. They arrived with casseroles and pies and sleeves rolled up, ready to help. The house filled with the smell of roasting turkey. Football murmured from the living room. The old radio on our kitchen counter played softly. Matthew wasn't there. Neither was his truck. Someone else took his usual spot at the curb. An empty space at the table reminded me of him, but it didn't hollow out the whole room the way it used to. But Emily brought a pecan pie she made from scratch. Her cheeks were flushed from the oven heat. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Aunt Ev, and for not letting him talk to you like that." My sister stayed behind to help clean up. She tied on one of my aprons and washed dishes while I dried. We didn't dissect what had happened. We didn't turn the kitchen into a courtroom. We just worked side by side, passing plates and small stories back and forth. And as I watched Jacob carve the turkey with those steady hands, as quiet music played from the radio on our kitchen counter, I realized something. Some men need spotlights to feel powerful. Others carry the whole show without saying a word. They fix what's broken before anybody notices it cracked. They stand beside you when the room turns cold. The room learned the difference that night at our wedding reception. And so did I. Because sometimes power isn't loud. It isn't the person with the sharpest joke or the cruelest punchline. It isn't the one who knows how to make a crowd roar. It's calm. It's steady. It's a man slipping tulips into a vase on a Friday afternoon. It's a woman, finally, deciding where her line is drawn and who is allowed to cross it. It's the man they called a nobody. And it's the woman who made sure the world finally saw him. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.